This is the CNC Geekcast, the podcast where two guys with speech impediments talk about movies. I'm Joseph Collins.
And I'm Paul Combs.
And on today's episode, we'll be talking about Darkest Hour. We're going to be talking about Gary Oldman's performance. We're going to be talking about the history behind the movie and all the movies connected to it, and much more. So stay tuned!
That is one of the more interesting things about this movie. Recently we talked about the King's Speech.
Yes.
And though they're not really connected in any way, they still kind of feel connected because we got to see the rise of kind of Bertie becoming this royal born, going from just royal born to actually becoming king. And in this movie we get to see Bertie as king, so that's kind of cool.
And then you saw Dunkirk come out earlier last year, and this movie brings up Dunkirk. And
this movie is kind of centered around Dunkirk, because this movie centers around the events. In September of 1939, King's Speech, we saw him make that statement about going into war with Germany. And at this point in this movie, the war had been happening a few months, and they're at Dunkirk. And if you've seen the movie Dunkirk, you kind of learn a little about it. It has the potential to be a disastrous loss. Hundreds of thousands of people. So Britain is kind of having to determine what they're going to do about this. Yeah. Do we surrender or do we keep fighting?
It wasn't surrender. They thought it was a peace accord, but really, in reality, it was surrender.
It was basically, they was wanting good terms in the surrender.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt like to me.
And Winston Churchill, of course, was like, no, we're not going to negotiate with a madman. That's pretty much what his stance was in this entire movie.
And the movie kind of focuses on that, because at the start of the movie, Winston Churchill is definitely on the fringe. He's kind of the only one in Parliament that wants to go to war. Everybody else is, it's not a long time after World War One.
That's like, what, 20 years, 15, 20 years? I mean, because World War One ended in 1919. This is 1939, so that's kind of like, that's almost a 20-year gap.
Yeah.
And the World War One probably had huge it was devastating for all involved, because you had so many people die, and that's a lot of genes and a lot of men who could have had children or help have children just die. And so, then you had also the war effort, and at that time, Germany. One of the reasons why Hitler rose was because Germany was expected to pay all the war damages, and so you had all of these terrible things. And the thing I like about this film is that one of the party leaders who disagreed with Churchill, but still pushed for his nomination against his better judgment, was around during World War One. So he saw firsthand the damage that war caused, and he didn't want his nation that he loved to continue to be in war. I really do appreciate that perspective and the differences between the First World War and the Second, and how it was imperative to fight the Second compared to the First.
It's one of those things where we now have the benefit of hindsight.
Yes.
Like, we now unequivocally know Hitler was a monster. So we unequivocally know that Winston Churchill may have been an objectively awful person, but he did make the right call.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, there's a lot of decisions that a lot of nations back then did. FDR did put German, Japanese Americans into concentration camps because of fear of espionage. And the same thing, he didn't let Jewish refugees because of fear of espionage. So the war really did bring out a lot of bad, even in the people who were considered to be heroes.
Yeah, that actually is kind of one of those things that gets swept under the rug after that.
Yeah.
Like, for example, even in America, before the attack on Pearl Harbor, a lot of people don't realize the support the Nazis had in America.
Yeah, there was a lot of Nazi rallies before. Yeah,
it's actually weird to look at, like, because you can actually see the pictures in Madison Square Garden, like Nazi rallies in the 30s, and it's odd.
It is eerie, but even the propaganda. And I saw that we the place I work at, we got like a puzzle that had war propaganda, and just the extreme statements they were making. It was just everything back then.
Even Dr. Seuss got in on it.
Did he?
Yes.
Oh wow! I did not know that. What was what's the example of it?
It was something about against pro-Japanese internment.
Oh, geez.
It's very interesting to think about.
It is. I didn't like the propaganda. I don't like propaganda in general, but at the same time, I find the psychological motivation behind it to be interesting. How tagline like that can be used to move so many people of public opinion.
But that actually is one of the more problems I had with this film.
Okay.
Is the fact that it did make Winston Churchill so kind of made him feel more like the good guy, and the guys wanting peace, the bad guy.
I may disagree in the sense that maybe the movie was trying to make Winston Churchill look like the character that the nation saw him as. Like maybe that he was this public persona that was somebody who the nation felt like it was needed at the time. That even though he was an objectively bad person, the nation only saw his persona, and maybe that was trying to capture what his character meant for the nation at the time.
I get what you're saying about him being at time, but think about someone like Winston Churchill in modern times.
Yeah.
Like, such a very obvious warmonger.
Yeah.
That's a very radical view to have.
Well, it is a radical view to have, but at the same time, like I said, he did have the World War I happen 20 years before, so he was one of the few that actually saw Hitler for what he was. So he did have that hindsight. And I'm wondering if he would have that same mentality today with some people, because Hitler was an extreme character. So we have to, is there an extreme character like today that he wished to be against in that regard?
Well, let's talk about Winston Churchill. What did you think about Gary Oldman bringing Winston Churchill to life?
Well, Gary Oldman is my favorite actor. I love how he just disappears in these roles, and I just enjoyed every single moment that he was on screen.
Truthfully, I kind of forgot. Had someone not told me it was Gary Oldman, I would never would have known it was Gary Oldman I was watching.
That's exactly why Gary Oldman is a great actor. Because even with The Dark Knight, it's like he played Commissioner Gordon with such a calm, kind of a passive character that she's like, Gary, if you actually talk to Gary Oldman, it's like, that's not Gary Oldman at all. That's just Commissioner Gordon. And then Winston Churchill is like, that is actually Winston Churchill on screen. I'm seeing, it's like James Franco with Tommy Wiseau.
Did you just compare Winston Churchill to James?
No. I didn't compare.
It was just a funny sentence.
It is a funny sentence. What I mean is like what Gary Oldman did for Winston Churchill, James Franco did with Tommy Wiseau in his performance.
I know it was just a funny sentence.
It is a funny sentence, but like Tommy Wiseau. But
that does illustrate kind of my problem with the film, though. You did enjoy it more than I mean, I didn't hate it, but I would definitely rank it like a solid okay. Because to me, this film was basically Gary Oldman's performance, the movie.
I do, and we talked about this, I do see the problems with the film, and I do agree that those are problems, and they're mostly problems with some of the characters involved. And maybe there was one plot line that they just pushed aside, and we can get into that later. But the thing I enjoyed about the film was the political maneuvering. I enjoyed the debate. I enjoyed how both sides, you had one side who wanted peace, and Gary Oldman and Winston Churchill wanted to defend England and knew that Hitler was not going to negotiate, because the side who wanted peace was willing to sign a peace accord. They were willing to be like, okay, we'll sign a non-aggression pact as long as you just leave us alone, and Hitler wasn't going to do it, and Churchill knew that. So Churchill was going to go out there and fight to his dying breath. Now his view was really unpopular, and he was a very unpopular person, and understandable. But I did enjoy that aspect of the film. I enjoyed that him trying to convince people and them trying to get him off the out of power, and just the inner debate about that. I really did, because it did a great job of positioning the importance of the event.
Well, I always enjoy that in movies too, truthfully. I always enjoy kind of the maneuvering of things, but it was the superfluous stuff in the film that actually did bother me.
Okay.
Like, for example, towards the end of the film, there's this scene in the subway, or as they call it, the tube, that feels straight out of a Disney movie. You know the scene I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's just so hokey. It's so wholesome that it doesn't feel like it fits in with the rest of the movie at all.
Yeah.
It's towards the end of the movie, and Winston Churchill is kind of contemplating signing that peace treaty, which isn't something that would ever happen. Isn't something that would ever happen with the character that they set up for us. So I didn't like that. And then he just goes to the subway and he talks to these regular people, and they're all very gung-ho, and it didn't fit with the rest of the movie to me.
Now I do understand why they did that. They wanted to show that the people was against Hitler. They were against the fascist movement. They were against that. And we can talk about this. And you talked about how you enjoyed the cinematography, and we'll get more in detail about this later in the episode. But there was a shot where Churchill was driving by, and you could see the camera panning over the streets of England and how these people were just going on with their day-to-day lives. And I just thought to myself, okay, well, that's an interesting, it was in slow motion, and that was an interesting thing they were trying to get across. But I thought to myself, okay, I understand what they were going at. They're trying to show that the people they're going to go down fighting. I think that they could have done a better job of doing that. I don't know how, but they could have. But I guess the filmmakers felt like that was the best way to do it. they wanted Churchill to heal from the people. How is he supposed to do it? Well, let's have him in a subway talking to the everyday person. I understood why they did that. I thought they could have done a better job or done something different to convey that myself.
And then there was some other plot lines that they kind of introduced that never go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Winston Churchill's wife, I'm not sure her name, makes appearances in the movie. But I really can't think of even why. Well, the movie loses nothing if she or the family doesn't appear.
Yeah, well, there's one thing that she did do, and she was able to keep Churchill's anger in check. Because there's one point in time where Churchill did yell at the new secretary, like really yell because she didn't properly write out a script or a speech, and she came in and basically was that calming voice for him in the movie, at least. I don't know about real life. But I do agree that there was like one moment we talked about how Churchill was running out of money. They were running out of money and they didn't address that afterwards. Like, well, we're broke. Okay, and then they had a romantic moment and that was it. That was the end of it. And that was a subplot. I
guess it was to humanize Winston Churchill more.
Yeah.
But with the fact that the movie was so clearly focused on this tremendous event, those moments like that kind of took it out for me.
Yeah.
And especially the subway scene, because the subway scene, but prior to that, the film had been building. Like, it had been building towards something. And it just turns out it had been building towards that subway scene. And it just felt like a waste.
Yeah, and it feels like the scene where he was in Parliament, he gave that speech, probably did a better job of conveying. Because at one point, after he went to the subway scene, then he was like, okay, well, I got the voices of the people, or at least the people I talked to, which told me that the people wanted to go fight, so I'm going to go and give this epic speech to these other people over here, and they're going to say, let's go fight too, and I'm like...
And I know this is also a kind of a stupid kind of complaint, and I shouldn't judge past people by this, but the real Winston Churchill never would have even talked to a black person.
Okay.
And that also bothered me
because you want your movies to be more historically accurate than not.
Yeah.
When it comes to these type of movies. No, I get that. I understand.
Because this movie does try to feel historically accurate, even like the Parliament and everything. And then it feels like it kind of deify Winston Churchill. Like, of course, Gary Oldman does a good job bringing this character to life, but this character doesn't feel like Winston Churchill.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand. But also, talking about other characters, what do you think of Bertie in this film? Did we talk about that?
We didn't. Bertie was kind of just there. I mean, it was interesting how the knowledge that we saw him grow in A King's Speech, and this is meant to be the same person. I probably actually would have enjoyed it more had it been Colin Firth in that performance.
Yeah, I think that would have been a cool reprisal of the role. Now, he was played
He was played by Ben Mendelsohn.
Okay.
Ben Mendelsohn, most people will know as Director Krennic in Rogue One. He is a good actor, but he just doesn't have that gravitas. And I guess it does work more for this film, because had you had Colin Firth, you would have had Colin Firth and Gary Oldman, and they wouldn't have wanted to detract from Gary Oldman like that.
Yeah,
having this other...
I guess so, but at the same time, I do suggest, we talked about this, my suggestion, and this film also talks about Dunkirk, and it's centered around Dunkirk too. My suggestion, and this is Paul's too, we talked about this, if you're going to go see this film, you can make a small movie marathon if you watch A King's Speech, Darkest Hour, and then watch Dunkirk. You kind of have yourself a small little unofficial trilogy, though.
Yeah, kind of like a World War II cinematic universe.
Exactly, all evolving around the exact same event. And he talked about how Dunkirk evolves around the event of Dunkirk. Well, this actually takes place, if you saw Dunkirk and then you saw this movie, you saw how they came up with that plan.
Now, it is interesting seeing both sides of the conflict, because this deals with the overarching war. Like, hey, this is a war, how do we win it? Whereas Dunkirk focuses on the individual soldiers.
Yeah.
So that's definitely the interesting juxtaposition. And I do think the movie Darkest Hour did do a good job portraying how leaders have to make these decisions.
Yes, that's something I enjoyed about it, because there was a scene, well, there was a secretary, which you felt was another...
The secretary was another thing that bothered me, because, again... This movie could have just been Gary Oldman and focused on the thing in Parliament, and I think that actually would have been the stronger film instead of introducing these superfluous elements.
Yeah, I get that. But there was one scene where they were trying to figure out... Dunkirk was a very big event for England at the time. It still is a big event in England's history, being part of its country's history, where you had pretty much the entire English army on this island.
Well, the English and the Allied forces, more like it. It was 300,000 300,000 soldiers.
Right, all on this island, and they
Yeah.
were trapped by Nazis, and they had to get them off. And in the war room, Churchill realized, okay, well, do we have any other options? What's going on here? And one said, well, we have this base over here, this outpost that has 4,000 men, and they're like, we got to send those 4,000 men to defend. They have to hold the position. And everybody was like, that's suicide. And then Churchill was like, well, 30,000 or 4,000. Which one do we pick? And I did like the scene where we found out that the secretary's brother was one of those soldiers in the outpost, and she had to write out the letter. There'll be no evacuation. We cannot get you out, and you have to hold your position till you die. And I loved how Churchill sat down and realized that, and realized what the decision he had to make. And the woman's brother was right there sitting next to her. That is a very powerful, emotional scene.
That was a good moment. I think the film did a very good job adding that element. Because you do see a couple of scenes with those soldiers that are fighting there. In fact, actually, this film had some fantastic cinematography.
Yeah, it did. I mean, we touched on that. I mean,
yeah, with some of the scene transitions, like for example, when this lieutenant, when they finally die by getting the bomb dropped on them, there's this really cool reverse shot they do. And then, for example, there's another really cool scene transition from the map to the soldier's face earlier in the film. There's a few amazing shots in this film.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting about that is this movie is centered around people talking. You really don't need these fantastic shots, but they do add to it.
Cinematography can be used as a very good way to tell the story. And so can editing. We talked about this with Arrival, how editing was used to tell that story when it comes to the non-linear editing way. And then you had this, which is the same with cinematography. We talked about this at King's Speech too, how there was a lot of off-centered frames with the King's Speech trying to show Bertie's feeling for most of the time that he felt off-centered, he felt not in the center of everything, that he felt uncomfortable. So the cinematography mirrored that. And so in this, the same thing. I mean, and like I said before, you had that shot of the crowd panning, and just to show the everyday life of everybody and the calm before the storm and how everything was about to change. It was bright, it was sunny, it was everyday thing, and here was Churchill knowing that this is all going to change because England did get bombed at one point.
The London Blitz.
Yeah, the London Blitz. So everything was about to change in that moment. So cinematographer did a great job of that.
I agree. I think it added to it. Because I have seen some films where it feels like the cinematographer just does things because they can.
Yeah, it's like, I am the greatest, look at my work, praise all be to me.
And it doesn't always add to it. While this really, it did add it to it. It added the human element. And
It did. And getting back to Bertie, I did like that scene where he went to Churchill's house. And at this point, Churchill didn't have any allies. And Bertie's like, anybody who can make Hitler mad, I'm okay with. And he wasn't a fan of Churchill either. Because Churchill was, of course, known to be this brash and honest person. Just like, John Adams wasn't really liked because of his honesty.
And Winston Churchill was also a drunkard.
That too. He drunk every single day. And in England, it's like, in the higher class, you got to have proper manners. And it's like he's constantly drinking.
He did not have particularly good manners.
No, even though that he said that he preferred to talk to people in the upper class, he didn't act like he was in the upper class.
Yeah, he did not.
So talking about this, Gary Oldman did get nominated for Best Actor. Do you think he deserves it?
I don't know, frankly, but I think he's going to get it.
You think so?
This film is an original story. This movie felt created to give Gary Oldman an Oscar.
You think so?
Because we know how much the Academy loves World War II films.
Do they?
Yes.
Oh, did they? I do not know how much they were in love with World War II films.
Well, think about it, like Saving Private Ryan, that was always World War II films. The Academy seems to love biopics and they love historical figures and things like that. So, as I said, this film seems tailor-made to give Gary Oldman his Oscar. And especially with everybody talking about Gary Oldman deserving one, like they did with Lear a few years ago.
Yeah.
I will frankly be shocked if Gary Oldman does not get this.
Well, I will be angry if he didn't, because I think that he's a great actor. I think he deserves at least one Oscar in his career. He has done such a great job in all his roles, and the reason why is because he has not at any point in time, to my knowledge, in all the movies I've seen, he has never just phoned it in. He put his all in all these performances, even when he didn't have to.
The only way I could see Gary Oldman losing is if they give it to Daniel Day-Lewis, because Daniel Day-Lewis is retiring from acting again. So,
well, what movie was he in?
Phantom Thread.
So he was
and he's Daniel Day-Lewis. I haven't seen Phantom Thread yet. I know I'm going to at some point. But it's Daniel Day-Lewis. We know he turned in a good performance as well.
I do hope Gary Oldman wins, but that's just my personal thing.
Getting back to kind of the whole cinematic universe thing, one of the things I do find kind of cool is how Darkest Hour ends and then how Dunkirk ends. They do complement one another really well. Because Darkest Hour ends with Churchill's famous triumphant speech about fighting them on the beaches, fighting them on the land, we will never surrender. Whereas Dunkirk ends, and you see these soldiers, and they just look utterly defeated. Not like they don't care, but they don't appear to care about fighting the Nazis. They just want to survive. It just creates the interesting juxtaposition, and it makes it where I pretty much have a 100% guarantee some editor, once these films are released on home video, is going to splice the two films together. I think there's about a 100% chance of that happening.
Well, I like the idea that you have those two positions. Because in Darkest Hour, there's actually a scene where Churchill knew he lied to the English people at one point, and he knew he lied, and he's like, was that the right decision to make?
Well, that is one of those things about the benefit of hindsight. Like, for example, like it's the world would be completely different had we lost, of course. But had we lost, you could look at things like that lie and see how they contributed. So it's just interesting. It creates that benefit of hindsight. Like, yeah, he lied, but that was the right decision.
The other thing I liked, or the thing that I learned, and I found this really interesting, and it just dawned on me when watching this film, because this film did a very good job of, it made an effort to highlight his skill with a pen, or his obsession to detail when it comes to what he was writing.
Well, one of the other members of Parliament did say Churchill had the uncanny ability to use the English language as a weapon.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he said at the end of the film. It's like, he was asked what just happened. He said he weaponized the English language and he released it. That's what pretty much, I think that's what the line pretty much was. And the lesson I learned in this is, and this stays true with any politician, any world leader, no matter what they say, they have to own what they say. When it comes to public speaking, when it comes to those speeches, for the most part, they have to own it, or they have to defend it, because if you're taking a position, and it may have been a funny sentence, what they said, they have to own it. They have to own their words, for the most part. Because somebody is going to try to use that against them to try to dethrone their position or try to turn public opinion against them. And they not only do they have to learn to defend their position, what they say is now out there. This is a position, and Churchill's position was not that popular, and he had to live with it. What he said, he had to live with, and that is true with any politician today. And the same thing with any leader. So that's a lesson I learned, was I found to be like, wow, that's another thing that I found powerful about that. It's like is the brave, I would say bravery, but what people in public speaking have to learn to do. It's like, was that the right thing to say? And that can wear heavy on people in general, and they have to carry that burden constantly. But there was one scene that I liked about this film, that's when he was talking to FDR. He was talking about FDR, and he was asking FDR for ships. Could you send ships? And FDR's like, I'm sorry, my hands are tied. I signed that non-aggression pact. I can't fight against Germany. America signed that. And so America was going to stay out of the war until they got bombed. And I just completely loved how FDR was like, look, I'll tell you what. We will send these planes we owe you across the Canadian borders, and you can pull them with horses if you wanted to. And Churchill was like, I'm sorry, did you say horses?
That was kind of an absurd moment.
Yeah.
There was some absurdity there.
There was absurd, but at the same time, it's like, legally, it was the thing. America could not at any point in time, according to the treaty.
I don't think that conversation actually happened, though.
You don't think so? Was not FDR's voice they got? Oh, recording? I don't know.
I'm not sure. But
I don't know. I don't know if it actually happened or not. I have to. Somebody has to.
It's another one of those things that bothered me because I don't think it actually happened.
Okay.
And that humor with the horses, it didn't fit the rest of the film.
Yeah. Well, I do. It didn't fit the rest of the film, but I can completely understand the predicament, and I like that because it showed the predicament that England was in.
The hopelessness?
Yeah, the no-win scenario.
And the fact that they would try pretty much anything to...
Yeah, and I like the fact that he was in a rock between... I mean, he got into office with basically no support, no resources, no soldiers, and he still was able, and that was the point of the film, was that he was able to rally the nation against Nazi Germany and the Axis forces. And there was a lot of lines in this film I did laugh about. I laughed a lot in this film, but not because of comedic films, but just because of how Churchill said something, or just the situation of what was said and the timing of it, and I guess the logic behind some of the statements. sometimes characters make statements that it's like, okay, you just said something stupid, and I'm going to say something clever to point that out. Type of moments in the film that I enjoyed.
Well, I did enjoy the moment that one line actually in this film that sticks out for me. It's you cannot interrupt me while I'm interrupting you.
Yes, I like that too. I mean, I love that. It just goes to show, Churchill's bluntness and his. I mean, you can tell he was a bad person because he screamed at, the radio guys like, "Give me a minute." So,
is this one of your favorite films of 2017?
I didn't. I don't want to say it's one of my favorite films, but I did enjoy elements because we talked about how there's some subplots that could win Nobel. I completely understand. I agree. There are some issues with this film. Well, I did enjoy overall just the event of it and how it showed that when it comes to decision makings, it's not always a clear-cut answer. You're gonna be a no-win situation in war. You're not going to make the best decisions. Even when we look back on it, it's like, I couldn't make those best decisions. So judging people back then just seems to be, for me, a bit arrogant.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Definitely, I enjoyed the film for those reasons. And you didn't because it's just...
I never said I didn't enjoy the film.
Okay.
Don't misrepresent my words.
Sorry, that was my bad.
I enjoyed it well enough. It was just an okay film.
Yeah.
It's not a film I'm going to come back to.
Yeah.
And wasn't especially memorable.
Yeah, that's because you've seen 47 films so far this year?
I like watching movies.
No, that's fine. But my point is, you've done a lot of films, so you have all these films to say, yes, it's not as good as that, not as good as that, not as good as that. This one's better. This one's better. Actually, there's one film that and this is like we're going to the Academy Awards, seeing how this was nominated for the Academy Award. There's one film you wanted to see nominated that didn't get.
Well, frankly, I don't know that this film should have been nominated. Just because it did have some filmmaking problems, even from a filmmaking standpoint.
Okay.
But I'm still disappointed a film called The Florida Project didn't. The Florida Project is by far my favorite film of 2017. Just because it's so true to life. It's a slice of life film, and it shows these people living in poverty, and it's just so real. Mm-hmm. There's something about feeling like you're peering through a keyhole to other people's lives.
Yeah.
When a film's able to do that. And the Florida Project did that to magnificence.
Yeah.
And I'm forever be disappointed that the Florida Project wasn't nominated for Best Picture. Not because I think it would have won, or not because I care about Best Picture, but just more people could have saw it. Because we all know more people will watch a film if it's going to call it a Best Picture nominee.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, right now, more people are probably going to watch the film because you mentioned it.
There I go.
There you go. All right. Geez, we did talk about this movie a lot, didn't we? I mean, we covered everything we needed.
We did.
What's on store for the audience next week?
Well, I talked about it a little bit last time on one of our Marvel episodes. The Marvel film I was looking forward to the most because I was unfamiliar with the character and it had such a great cast. And well, we finally got that film. You know, I'm talking about Black Panther.
Yes.
We got out of it a couple weeks ago. We have a lot of thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
The film think it's safe to say the film did not disappoint us.
No, and the box office numbers is huge.
So just stay tuned for that. Listen to our thoughts about Black Panther and that incredible cast.
But in the meantime, I'm Joseph Collins.
And I'm Paul Combs.
And you've been listening to the CNC Geekcast.